Welcome, viewers. Today we explore a legendary clash of ancient power and divine wrath. Behold the greatest war machine of the ancient world. Elite chariots driven by burning fury. Opposing them are 1,000,000 terrified slaves. They have no weapons, carrying only crying children. Pinned against the raging Red Sea, they face an impossible choice: surrender to the cruel whips, or drown. History is not always written by the strong. The sea itself yields to a supreme, divine power. In the late 13th century before Christ, the Egyptian Empire ruled with an unforgiving fist. Pharaoh commanded the pinnacle of human engineering, an unstoppable bronze army. 600 war chariots formed the vanguard of this brutal, terrifying war machine. Each heavy vehicle carried 2 elite, battle-hardened soldiers, armed with lethal, curved bronze swords. Their war horses were bred for pure stamina, their hooves striking the desert sand like rolling thunder. They pursued a desperate mass of runaway slaves, moving blindly through the dark, hostile wilderness. 1,000,000 Israelites fled their cruel masters, carrying only ragged clothes on their tired backs. Old men stumbled over the rocky terrain, their fragile bodies pushed far beyond normal human limits. Frightened mothers clutched their crying infants, looking back into the pitch-black, terrifying night sky. They carried no weapons, no shields, and absolutely no training to defend their vulnerable families. Leading this terrified multitude was a single imposing old man named Moses, the chosen prophet. He held no gleaming sword, only a simple, heavy wooden shepherd's staff gripped tightly in his worn hands. Before them lay the treacherous waters of the Red Sea, an uncrossable natural barrier. The ocean waves crashed violently against the jagged shore, mirroring the growing panic in their hearts. To the ancient mind, the deep water represented ultimate chaos, an abyss of endless death. Historical records show this was a perfectly executed, lethal military trap. The rugged mountains blocked their escape to the south, while the freezing ocean trapped them in the east. They were effectively cornered, waiting helplessly for a devastating fate by the approaching gods. The contrast in pure physical power was absolutely staggering, a grim imperial cruelty. On one side, the apex predators of the Bronze Age, hungry for immediate, devastating vengeance. On the other side, an exhausted, defenseless flock of refugees, trapped between cold water and sharp steel. A suffocating silence fell over the shores, broken only by the howling wind and weeping children. Would the great Pharaoh reclaim his lost property, or would he order a total, merciless destruction? The Israelites stared into the dark abyss, realizing they had nowhere left to safely hide. This was not just a battle for human freedom. It was a cosmic test of ultimate, divine faith. The tension in the cold night air became unbearable, thick with the overwhelming scent of salt and fear. Calculations predicted an absolute, devastating ruin for the trapped Hebrew tribes. But history pivots on miraculous moments, defying every known physical law. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble violently beneath their feet, shaking the dark, sandy coastline. A massive, choking cloud of dust rose on the western horizon, blotting out the pale, silver moonlight. The terrifying thunder of galloping war horses shattered the desperate prayers of the slaves. Pharaoh's elite forces had finally arrived, their bronze armor gleaming under the distant lightning. The Egyptian charioteers whipped their massive beasts, accelerating into a deadly, focused charge. Absolute primal panic infected the frightened Israelites, spreading like a raging wildfire. Desperate men and women collapsed onto the muddy ground, screaming in uncontrollable terror. They turned their intense anger toward Moses, cursing the old prophet for leading them into this trap. They cried out that dying as slaves in Egypt would have been far better than bleeding on this beach. Tactically, the Egyptian cavalry had achieved a flawless psychological victory. The psychological terror of the approaching chariots completely shattered their fragile resolve. Families huddled tightly together, shielding their children from the inevitable raining bronze swords. The wind howled furiously, whipping their ragged clothes as the heavy chariot wheels ground into the dirt. The soldiers raised their sharp khopesh blades, ready to execute the brutal, unforgiving will of their king. In the Book of Exodus, the situation was completely hopeless from a human perspective. The towering waves behind them offered no salvation, only a cold, dark, and watery final grave. What would you do if trapped between a raging sea and a merciless, heavily armed army? This is the ultimate crucible of faith, the exact moment where human strength completely fails. The charioteers screamed their terrifying war cries, their eyes locked firmly onto their helpless, crying prey. Dust and ocean spray mixed in the violent wind, creating a blinding, chaotic storm of earthly panic. The old men fell to their weary knees, whispering final, desperate prayers to a seemingly silent God. The distance between the sharp bronze blades and the defenseless slaves rapidly, terrifyingly, vanished. In standard military conflict, this precise moment marks the absolute end of the engagement. The Israelites received a tactical knockout blow before a single deadly weapon was swung. But Moses did not flinch, nor did he retreat from the terrifying display of imperial might. He stood like an unmoving rock against the crushing tide of human despair and violent aggression. His piercing eyes stared through the blinding sandstorm, focused on a reality invisible to the rest. The prophet prepared to unleash a power that would forever alter the course of human history. Amidst the deafening roar of the approaching cavalry, Moses calmly stepped toward the raging surf. He slowly raised his heavy wooden shepherd staff high into the turbulent, storm-filled night sky above. Instantly, a supernatural, powerful east wind descended upon the dark, churning ocean waters. The physical force of the gale was completely deafening, masking the loud screams of the angry soldiers. The dark sea began to violently boil and writhe, as if gripped by an invisible, almighty hand. Defying the laws of physics, the massive body of water began to tear itself apart. The deep, churning ocean split right down the middle, revealing a hidden, ancient path in the muddy floor. Two colossal walls of water rose up on either side, defying the rules of earthly gravity. The water stood firm, like massive blocks of solid, glowing cyan crystal under the flashing, bright lightning. The impossible had just happened, right before their completely stunned, widely opened, terrified eyes. The absolute power of the divine creator had intervened in a brutal human conflict. The violent, roaring storm winds held the massive, crushing weight of the ocean firmly, safely in its place. A glowing bioluminescence illuminated the seabed, casting an eerie, mystical light. Both the terrified slaves and the bloodthirsty soldiers were paralyzed by this terrifying miracle. The war horses reared up in absolute panic, their primal instincts terrified by the unnatural sea. The charioteers struggled wildly to control their massive beasts, shielding their eyes from the blinding wind. The previously panicked Israelites fell perfectly silent, their weeping halted by absolute awe. Moses gestured forward, commanding his people to march directly into the dark ocean abyss. It required unimaginable courage to step between those two towering, unstable liquid walls. The wet, muddy seabed was littered with sharp coral and jagged, dangerous rocks from the deep ocean floor. Yet the millions of refugees began their miraculous journey across the exposed, dry land. This was not merely an escape. It was a supernatural demonstration of divine authority. The greatest empire on earth was suddenly rendered completely powerless by the forces of nature. Their bronze weapons and advanced chariots meant absolutely nothing against the raw power of God. The towering walls of water cast long, terrifying shadows over the escaping crowd of refugees. But the glowing, mystical light safely guided their feet through the terrifying, uncharted ocean depths. Every single step on that muddy floor was a profound, undeniable testament to their freedom. They were crossing the ultimate threshold, leaving their chains behind and entering a totally new existence. Seeing their property escaping, the furious Egyptian generals made a fatal decision. Blinded by pure rage and extreme pride, they ordered their chariots directly into the ocean floor. The heavy wheels immediately began to sink deeply into the treacherous mud of the seabed. The massive war horses struggled and panicked, heavily burdened by the thick, unforgiving ocean sludge. The invincible military formation quickly devolved into a chaotic, tangled, struggling mess. As the last Israelite reached the opposite shore, the supernatural howling wind suddenly died. The divine grip on the ocean was released, and the towering walls of water began to collapse. Millions of tons of crushing, dark seawater crashed down relentlessly upon the trapped, screaming soldiers. The devastating kinetic impact obliterated the chariots into tiny splinters. Elite warriors and massive horses were violently swept away, drowning in the unforgiving depths. The pride of Egypt was totally erased from the face of the earth in a single, terrifying moment. The violent, churning ocean swallowed the entire army, leaving only broken debris floating. An absolute, terrifying silence quickly replaced the deafening screams of the drowning soldiers. The dark waters washed the muddy shores, burying the heavy bronze armor under the deep ocean floor. The massive, arrogant Egyptian empire was defeated without a single sword raised against them. On the eastern shore, the exhausted Israelites stood in complete, overwhelming shock and disbelief. They saw the total destruction of their brutal masters, realizing they were finally, truly free. The roaring ocean had thoroughly cleansed the bitter oppression, washing away heavy slavery. Yet this terrifying display of divine wrath was a massive graveyard for human arrogance. The morning sun slowly rose, illuminating a changed world and a newly born, hopeful nation. Moses stood quietly on the rocky beach, leaning heavily on his worn wooden staff again. The epic battle of the Red Sea concluded with a miraculous victory for the slaves. However, Survival was only the very first, difficult step in their treacherous journey. A chaotic, massive crowd of freed slaves urgently needed a strong law to become a kingdom. To survive the harsh wasteland, they desperately required a sacred, holy center for their faith. This profound necessity eventually led to the creation of the Holy Ark. What exactly was this mysterious golden artifact that instantly destroyed anyone who touched it? Discover the shocking, lethal secrets of this ancient divine weapon in our thrilling next episode. The Red Sea washed away imperial arrogance. Was this a genuine divine miracle or nature's trick? Share your thoughts on this ancient mystery in the comments. Your perspective uncovers the hidden truth. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more epic history.